As you saw in my video covering the PMP exam content outline item 1.2.4, you're likely not going to be married to one leadership style, but rather applying several different styles and even drawing applicable elements from those styles when considering context, and some more context. Hear context? Think situation or circumstance. As your project progresses, you saw that you would be adapting your style to the situation. As you lead various team members, it's helpful to think back to the 4 layers of diversity that I mentioned in an earlier video. So the image I sketched here is based on the 4 layers of diversity from Garden, Schwartz, and Rowe. The center of the 4 layers is personality. Leaders will consider the styles, their personality and behavioral styles of their team and other stakeholders, of course, as well, and then adapt their own behaviors, their own words, their tone, their pacing, their body language to better communicate with and relate to the person or people at hand. Again, DISC is but one of the style assessments that PMI mentions, but I thought it would be prudent to stick with one example of an assessment and show how it is applied in many circumstances, or should I say context, wink, wink. Things to consider when leading our Ds. This is the decisive dominant style. Ds like directness and brevity. They want results. They love decision-making, problem-solving, achieving goals. They're confident and competitive. If they could ask one question, it would be what? The classic phrase that the D would say is be brief, be brilliant, be gone. So don't worry about being buddy-buddy with them. Your friendly chit-chat is actually probably not going to be well received. Think bottom line. If you could offer choices, that would be great, because guess what? Ds love to make decisions. If someone they respect, like someone in a position of power, is behind something, then they'll be easier to influence. Watch out though, when Ds are overusing their superpowers, they might force their way, find fault, come off as blunt, intimidating, or rude, or even be insensitive, impatient, aggressive. They could be overpowering and domineering. If there's a conflict and a D is involved, they'll really appreciate directness. So you could actually just tackle it head on, confront them, perfectly fine. That's right up their alley, actually. So know that they seek victory, though, when faced with a conflict. The next is the I style. Things to consider when leading the I's would be, and this is the influential style, things to consider here, since our friendly I's love communication and are energetic, expect some very enthusiastic chit-chat and outgoingness, even emotional displays of social connection, like big ones, but don't let this derail the topic at hand. If I's could ask only one question, it would be who. And they like that coolness. So speaking to the coolness of something will help to win them over. For example, what big name company, magazine, influencer, etc. is interested in our project's deliverables. Make sure they write down what they're agreeing to, because they tend to get really excited about that big picture. So ensure that they're actually taking the time to get organized about all those details and all the timing. Watch out. Sometimes they're very excited when they talk with you or with the team, but they have trouble following through, as in they won't. They could also become overly emotional or be unrealistic. If there's ever a conflict and an I is involved, plan to tread lightly. They could become super stressed out, explosive, and emotional, and even make attacks against others. So think put downs and what have you. Your approach should be positive, so take a positive approach and then ease your way into the difficult part of the conversation. The next style is the S style. So things to consider when leading your S's. This is the supportive, stable style. S's are loyal, sincere, supportive, even tempered. They seek harmony and they bring people together like glue. They love stability and systems. These are your good listeners. If they could ask only one question, it would be how, especially in the sense of seeking cooperation. Show a personal interest in your S's, be it by asking about their aspirations and goals on a personal level. And since they like stability, you could give them time to respond or time to come up with a decision. That would be really awesome of you. Draw out objections and keep an eye out for any signs that their feelings have been hurt when dealing with situations that personally affect them. Showing that you authentically value your relationship with them will go a long way. So things to look out for: S's tend to dislike change, so be sure to give them context regarding changes and, if possible, choices. S's can be the avoiders. We're talking avoiders of risk, avoiders of conflict, and they could cave too easily. So they might be too passive or become aloof. They could also get stressed out by bluntness or even stressed out by super brief communications, especially when no context is provided. If there's a conflict with an S, they're likely going to be stressed out, but instead of fighting and having that explosive type of response, you'll see the flight response. So silence, aloofness, or maybe the fawn, appeasing response. They don't do so well if someone comes at them with a hostile approach. All right, and now let's consider our C's. Things to consider when leading C's, the compliant and conscientious style. C's love accuracy. They care so much about quality. They're cautious. They love following rules. These are your by the book kind of people. They love sharing their knowledge, and they'll ask questions if there's a change. Lots of questions. Your C's have high standards. They love to analyze. If you have solo players on your team, those might be your C's. They typically come with a nice handy do not disturb sign taped to their back. Keep it to themselves. If C's could ask one question, it would most certainly be why. You can and should skip the personal chit chat with this group. Be straightforward. Have a lot of information ready to share with them. Ask them how they see the situation at hand. Have data, facts, statistics, or other information on hand. Make sure it's from a reputable, reliable source. Even a good old pro and con list is likely to be well received by your C. Also know that your C's don't want to be the center of the attention, so don't put them center stage or in front of a large group. Watch out. They could be rigid, overly critical, overly focused on being perfect. They may ask a ton of questions, so be prepared to answer all the questions you think they'll likely ask. They might get too critical of others, and they'll also tend to stress if they feel that you are wasting their time, or perhaps the socialization and shenanigans and chit-chattiness of others might piss them off too. If there's a conflict with a C, they'll actually probably be right there with the S, avoiding it. C's tend not to assert themselves, keeping to themselves, even under normal circumstances. C's will likely withdraw from the conflict to go off and plan their next move. Because they love accuracy and perfection, if someone challenges their work that they just put so much effort into and went down every single rabbit hole in every single direction, and they're like, this is it. Well, they could really take that quite personally if someone challenges all of that. In addition to leading all your various team members and other stakeholders from the center of the 4 layers diversity that I was just talking about with the DISC styles, as we talked personality, you could expand out from there layer by layer, adapting your leadership style as appropriate. For example, if you consider work experience, layer 3, someone with more experience and a stellar track record will need less leadership than someone who has no prior work experience. Also in layer 3 is geographic location. How will you adapt your leadership style for those who are geographically dispersed? You could also consider the team development stage at hand. What does that mean? Well, does your team just come together and it's forming? Or are they perhaps it's forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. We'll see that later when we look at Tuckman's ladder. But which stage are we in? We'll look at the Tuckman team development model and another one, so don't worry, we'll come back to that. Another model that PMI often references, I already told you about the Situational Leadership 2 model, and this comes from Paul Hershey, Kenneth H. Blanchard, and Dewey E. Johnson's book entitled Management of Organizational Behavior. When leading your team, you could think of that saying, ready, willing, and able. And the situational leadership model is actually considering the team's readiness. So according to this model, readiness is determined by two pieces: willingness, so ranging from unwilling and insecure to willing and confident, and the ableness, which is able or unable. So you could determine your team's readiness level, and that's going to plop you into a different quadrant on their nice little graph. So no, I am not warding off vampires. This is just showing 4 quadrants on a graph. Different quadrant equals different situation equals different leadership style. So one quadrant is where you'll show up as a directive leader. You're telling people what to do. But a lot of the time you want your team to advance, so you don't need to tell them what to do all the time. So the next quadrant is the coaching leader. After you've sufficiently coached someone, then maybe they're ready for you to show up and now just support them. So that plops you on into the supportive leader quadrant. And then the last quadrant is where you delegate. And now that person is going to handle specific activities or decisions on their own. On a related note, in the Essential Scrum book, we also see Apello's 7 levels of decision making, and both ends are the same, where on the one end, you're telling the team or person what to do, and on the other end, you're delegating. And so the Situational Leadership 2 model has 4 quadrants. Apello has 7 different levels. So in summary, you are a flexible and adaptable leader. You show up and lead based on the context, the situation at hand, and the stakeholder or stakeholders who you are showing up for.